Rise Live. My name is Dennis Okari, and we are on our second segment of our interview. Interestingly enough, the Kenyans for Kenya initiative, which was actually initiated after, grim pictures and grim stories of Kenyans who are actually dying of hunger and drought in drought-stricken areas in the country, and more so Turkana. So far we're almost hitting the 1 billion mark, which is something to be happy about. And internationally, the citizens of other countries are pretty much concerned about what's happening in Kenya, and not just Kenya, but the whole entire Horn of Africa. And they're coming in with foodstuffs, and they're also coming in with medicine. And this is something that's really, really good. Now, we're going to briefly look at this situation. And in studio, we'll be talking to the director of Friends of Lake Turkana, Ikal Angelei. Welcome very much.
Thank you very much.
And like I said, when you talk about Turkana, the first thing that comes to mind is drought. But late last week and this week, we keep hearing floods. Now, people would want to understand, in one instance, we see grim pictures of dryness, nothing green in Turkana, and then the next thing you hear, there are floods. And you hear women have to trek long distances to just tap water or even get close to the next borehole. What's the situation in Turkana? What's happening?
Well, there are two different situations. There are places where it is raining. When I left on Sunday, it was raining. There was a lot of rain.
Which part of Turkana?
That is in Turkana Central. Turkana North, Lokishoge was raining. Turkana South is also raining. But the certain parts, there has been drought. But as we know, the rains are coming. So the movement from extreme drought to flash floods makes the community very vulnerable. We have not, the early warning systems seem not to be working very well, because all along the government was told there's going to be drought. And yet we know that the rains are going to come. Just like in other parts of Kenya where the rains have come late, we also get short rains. So that's exactly what has happened.
So which are these parts now that are pretty much dry?
You get places like Kerio, is pretty dry. Certain parts of the extreme north, Lokitang, Kokuro, that's next to the border of Ethiopia and Kenya, that is very dry. But you get places where there's rains. And a lot of it is also influenced by the environment. Places where a lot of the trees have been cut down are less likely to get rain.
You are a local, Ikal. Which is the part that is severely hit by this drought situation?
The drought is hitting the northern part more because the Turkanas on the north are predominantly pastoralists. They move a lot. So that hits them a lot more. The impact is a lot more on them. And then there's parts of between South Turkana and Central Turkana that there's a lot of drought. Also the west part of Turkana Central, there is a lot of drought there.
The urban centers, to be specific, Nairobi is the hub of information, communication. Everything is centralized here. And when, relief efforts are actually being carried out, they're actually carried out from here, which is the capital of the country. And does this kind of information reach people in Turkana? Right now, we're actually talking about almost hitting the 1 billion mark, which is something very, very commendable. And we've got other people from other countries coming in with foodstuff and medicine. Does this information get to the locals in Turkana?
Part of it does. The places where it's hard to reach, even the relief vehicles don't have a way to get there. So part of the information does get to the people, part of it doesn't. You get places where people still didn't know who the Prime Minister was. So it's that bad.
Are you serious? They don't know who the Prime Minister is?
Some places, they still are very backward. They're really marginalized. And so there is need to get this information to them. But while we commend the efforts by both Kenyans and the international community, it is sad that the root causes of this continuous vicious cycle are not going to be discussed. 2 years ago, we did Jaza Lori. This year, it's Kenyans for Kenyans. What are we going to do next year?
That's the question that is on the lips of so many people, because we've been talking about these kind of initiatives when every year we come up with these names and we come up with these campaigns, and Kenyans are very, very, pure in heart to actually contribute and extend their hands to our brothers and sisters in Turkana. But the main issue is what exactly? Because the politicians, on the other hand, who have been accused, claim that the area is it's not a question really of just taking food, it's the climate. They blame the climate. What is the problem?
See, 10 years ago, what used to happen was the drought came every 10 to 15 years. Due to climate change and natural human disasters, it's coming to 2 years every time. So every 2 years we get a drought, sometimes 1 year. We basically have to look at it at a holistic angle. There's insecurity. There's climate change. We as a people have to discuss population control, because what is happening is, as a community, we are leaving what rural families looked at wealth, children as a sign of wealth, where they were either bride price or labor. But now what's happening is everything around us is changing. The environment is changing, globalization. Can we afford to still maintain, with a low mortality rate and high fertility rate, can we afford to maintain this kind of lifestyle with many children when everything around us is changing?
So you are saying the climate issues, there are also culture issues.
Cultural issues, there's insecurity, and there's a general food policy in this country has to be looked at holistically. Because when the Prime Minister comes and says, irrigate, we already have enough irrigation projects that are not working.
Why are they not working?
Because how they were set up was not, they didn't engage the people, and we're looking at producing maize. It may not work to produce maize. Why can't we look at crops that are resistant to drought or use little water? Details like that. We're using the Takwel River for irrigation. And if you saw in the media a few weeks ago, they're showing some places where they're producing food. Then there's another extreme that people don't have food. We have to look at the issue of the food policy in this country as a whole, where farmers in Njambini are subsidized to then be able to produce for farmers in Turkana, for people in Turkana. We can't keep saying, irrigate, so you're producing for yourself.
So in your opinion, as a local from Turkana and as the director of Friends of Lake Turkana, where you've really done a commendable job, what then can the country do? Or if someone wants to help, for example, Kenyans for Kenya, they really want to help, what can someone do to alleviate this thing once and for all then?
I think we have to lobby in a whole, as a people, as a nation, where the leaders we push for policies that are looking at long term rather than the short term. Because now we are doing an issue of let's take care of the food now. Let's take care of the situation now. But if we don't discuss insecurity in that region, if we don't discuss infrastructure, because infrastructure will open the place. The CEO of Equity the other day said, if we open resorts where Kenyans can say, I would like to visit Turkana as a tourism site, because we have amazing sites. But because of the insecurity and the infrastructure, lack of roads, people do not want to go there.
I mean, do you sort of get a feeling like the leadership of the day perhaps could be taking advantage of, coming in and to seemingly look like they're extending a helping hand, but once it's done, once the cameras are shut, they're off, nothing happens. Do you think the leadership is not really actively involved in, pursuing this later on and getting to do follow-ups?
In a way, I tend to think that the status quo, some people do benefit from the status quo.
Wow.
I do think that. Because if the people were well equipped to be able to make their own destiny, where they can look for markets for their handicraft, where they can look for, let's look example like fish. We have a great fish in Lake Turkana, but because of the parasites in the fish, we cannot get a market externally. So looking at fish ponds, looking at electricity. We produce electricity in Takwel, but we don't get the electricity in Turkana. The electricity is brought to the rest of Kenya. Yet in Turkana, we have to use fuel to then propagate the energy, which makes it expensive for anyone to set up anything, even the fish industry itself. So there are a lot of things that have to be looked into to really be able to open up the region. So if we cannot do agriculture, we can do other things that will allow people to have an income to then be able to purchase food.
I mean, let's briefly look at Friends of Lake Turkana and Lake Turkana in general. How can it be used to actually help the surrounding communities in actually dealing with issues of food insecurity?
One, because the one thing that is a problem there is the breeding zone is shared, is the delta. If you look at the Omo Delta, it's in Kenya. One thing we have to deal with the security situation in that region, because the communities who depend on fishing there can no longer do the fishing because their lives are, every other day you're hearing deaths in Todonyang, every other day. So that's one of the things you have to do with the security. But if the fishing industry is really looked into and a market provided for them, where the roads are made, because the problem is when the traders come to buy fish, you're told, well, the road is bad, so it's an extra cost for us. So the fishermen are selling this fish at very low prices. So they basically break even or just meet their basic needs.
Well, Ikal, we are going to come right back to you and we'll look more into what's happening to